that strike that occurred around 7 p.m. that day. A good portion of those rockets landed in Ashkelon as well, and we happened to be en route to a call, and we had to bail out of the fire truck as they came in.
Hi there, it's WAMC News Director Ian Pickus. And on this episode of the WAMC News Podcast, we speak with Sullivan County's Public Safety Commissioner, who's just back from a volunteer mission to Israel following the attacks. Scott Schulte was working as a volunteer firefighter in southern Israel on the heels of the October 7th attack by Hamas as part of a mission by the Emergency Volunteers Project. And to explain what he saw there, Schulte joins us now. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, I take it you've been over on missions like this a number of times. Was it different this time?
Yeah. In the past, we've been to Israel for both training trips as well as deployments related to natural disasters and terrorist activity, but we've not seen anything to this scale in the past. This was certainly a new experience, but a rather challenging one for the organization. We needed to fill quite a number of firefighter roles in a very short amount of time, and the logistics surrounding Ben Gurion's closure early on made our deployment delayed a few days. So we had to be ready, to hit the ground running as soon as we arrived.
What kind of work were you and your cohort doing?
So we had a series of teams established, and they were placed strategically throughout Israel based on our anticipation of what might occur as the conflict evolved. So we put people in places like Haifa, Jerusalem, and the Tel Aviv area, knowing that those would be likely targets for a larger event associated with Iran-backed factions. My team was located in Ashkelon, a few kilometers from the Gaza border, to deal with the initial ongoing issue with both terrorists infiltrated still in the country and not yet neutralized, as well as the rocket attacks. So we supplemented the Israelis. We were working out of a community center that was converted into a temporary fire station because the civilians were all locked down in their homes. And we worked a four-person engine crew, 2 Israelis and 2 Americans on each engine. Myself, a firefighter from Missouri, and 2 firefighters from Texas. And we operated as a traditional firefighting team, responding to regular fires as well as responding to rocket strikes and similar war-related incidents.
Can you just tell us what it looks like now, a few weeks after the October 7th attacks?
So it really hasn't changed a lot in the last couple of weeks, believe it or not. The conflict is still in a full-throated attack. Yesterday there was an attempt by Hamas to infiltrate again. They were able to get terrorists in both by ground and by sea. They were fortunately neutralized fairly quickly by the IDF, and the rocket barrages were quite intense throughout the country yesterday. So it is ebbing and flowing. There were a couple of quiet days that we had in the middle of our deployment while the president and the governor were in Israel, thankfully. But before and after, it was quite consistent, and it maintains that same image today. Rocket attacks throughout the day, depending on where you are in the country, both in the north and the south. And, the emotional toll, the firefighters, the civilians, the IDF, every single person in that country knows or is related to someone that was murdered. So they haven't even approached the point where they can begin to mourn yet. They're still in a full response phase. Many of them haven't stopped working since the 7th. So they're struggling with, the ability to kind of comprehend what happened and mourn, but also continuing to fight this ongoing attack that, doesn't seem to be letting up.
I think Israelis have become inured to a certain degree to rocket attacks. It's part of life, depending on where you live. Were there any times where you were in danger during this mission?
Well, that's certainly the case for them. All too often when something occurred that I was surprised to see, the response from the Israelis was, "This is life in Israel." Yeah, there was quite a few close calls. We had a building struck directly across the street from the fire station this past Friday. It was a rather heavy barrage that went on for a while, struck quite a number of apartments, houses, cars, and open spaces throughout the city of Ashkelon, the southern portion. And, those continue to occur even when we're out on the scene of a rocket attack. So we have to be aware of that. And the all too famous supposed strike on a hospital in Gaza that's all over the news that was caused, of course, by a terrorist rocket that fell short. We were actually in that strike as well, that strike that occurred around 7 p.m. that day. A good portion of those rockets landed in Ashkelon as well, and we happened to be en route to a call, and we had to bail out of the fire truck as they came in.
There's a humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza as we speak. President Biden has taken pains to distinguish between Hamas and the Palestinian civilians living there, 1 to 2 million people. As a first responder, did any of your work involve responding to the humanitarian needs on the other side of the line?
It did not. We that portion of Gaza has been evacuated, although obviously the evacuation isn't complete, and it's quite a number of people struggling to find safe homes. But that ordered evacuation precluded us from being able to enter the northern portion of Gaza. But we certainly are all too well aware. In past deployments, we've worked in areas around the West Bank and Gaza, and operated at scenes involving Palestinians. So our efforts are not ignorant of the needs of all people, and that's the driving factor for all first responders. So our work is to help whoever needs it, so long as they are civilians in need.
Where does your interest in Israel come from? As I said earlier, you've been on many missions through this group, Emergency Volunteers Project.
Yeah, it started as nothing more than a bit of intrigue and excitement. The idea of going to the Middle East to learn new firefighting tactics, new approaches to terrorism, those types of things just struck a chord as being, something kind of unfamiliar and a new page in my career. And before long, it quickly turned into a personal effort for me. I met firefighters and their families. They took us in immediately as if we were friends and family. To this day, it's been 13 years I've been with the organization, and I still have some of my closest friends in the world are Israelis that I met through this organization. And one of my closest friends was actually supposed to be at my home on the 7th when this all happened, and he had to take his family and get back to Israel as fast as possible. And ironically enough, I had said to him on Friday night when he was coming to my house, I said, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll come to Israel, as a joke. And sure enough, 4 days later, he and I were side by side.
It occurs to me, you have close ties to like the New Paltz area. Now you're working in Sullivan County. These are places where there are a lot of Jewish people and Jewish buildings, synagogues, people with close ties to Israel. Does it make you think any differently about safety back in New York, having just gotten back from Israel?
Yeah, it certainly it strikes close to home when you think about your friends and your neighbors that are potentially have the potential for experiencing the same terror both here in the United States as well as in Israel if they're back home there or visiting. So it certainly adds a very personal element. We continue to work with our federal partners in law enforcement, the state police, sheriff's office, very, very closely while I was in Israel, communicating to make sure that we had really effective coverage and situational awareness back in Sullivan County. So that was a really great opportunity we had to use our partnerships and our connections to get all the resources and intelligence that we need to continue to protect the Sullivan County residents, even when I was abroad.
Any plans to go back?
At this point, we have 3 successive waves of firefighters organized and in line to go. Certainly in the event that they need additional resources or that or in the hopefully unlikely situation that it escalates to a larger conflict, then I think there will certainly be a need for any qualified and willing firefighters. And I think at that point I'll have no choice but to go back and do what I can to help.
That's Sullivan County's Public Safety Commissioner Scott Schulte discussing his recent mission to Israel as part of a mission by the Emergency Volunteers Project. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, and stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, that does it for this episode of the WAMC News Podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, I'm Ian Pickus.